just coming here made me realize how much better an in-person conference still is. It doesn't even compare. So it's been really great being here again.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about what's new for Visual Studio Code, including some performance features, upgrades to GitHub Copilot, and CMake Enhancements. So with that, let's begin. So before we start, my name is Alexandra Kemper. I'm the PM for the C++ extension in Visual Studio Code.
And I'm Sinem Akinci, and I'm the PM for C++ Copilot and CMake in VS Code.
And so today, we're going to be talking about a lot of the different areas we've been investing in VS Code. And all of these different features would not be possible without your feedback, because everyone who we talked to at the last CppCon for customer development, all the people who filed GitHub issues on us in the last year, thank you so much. And your feedback has really helped us decide what features we need to be building, what we need to be investing in. And so please, if you see anything today that you have feedback on or questions or issues with, please come talk to us. We would love to hear from you. And so with that, our 4 big feature areas we've been looking in is how to have a faster performance, especially in the C++ extension, having smarter GitHub Copilot suggestions, and kind of upgrading the GitHub Copilot experience. Then having easier to use features in the C++ extension, the CMake extension, and more features in this area. And then also making Copilot more extensible and customizable specifically for your scenario. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And if you hear any of this and you're like, wait, this is VS Code? I thought this was Visual Studio. There's a separate talk about Visual Studio. So if you want a full-fledged IDE that has great enterprise solutions, that talk is actually tomorrow. It's at 1:30. But you're welcome to stay and also hear what we have in VS Code. And that talk is by our colleagues Miriam Girmay and Michael Price. So with that, when we talk about the C++ extension and the CMake Tools extension, these are the 2 extensions we mean, and they're available in VS Code. And we also are going to be talking about those 2 specifically, as well as the GitHub Copilot and the GitHub Copilot Chat extensions. And the Copilot and the Copilot Chat extension are actually bundled together, so when you install one, you also get the other. And while there are many, many different extensions that Microsoft has, that other people have written in VS Code, such as the remote development, live share, these are the ones we're going to be focusing on today. But we encourage you to also try out all the other suite of extensions we have available. So with that, in terms of performance improvements, we have been really listening to your feedback about how to make different parts of the performance in the C++ extension faster, snappier, to kind of get you from having nothing available to opening your project and being ready to go. And so the first area we've been investing a lot in is having faster symbol search. So this is the search for symbols in your workplace command, available through the command palette or by pressing Control+, period. And this faster symbol search is now 3.6 times faster on average. And the numbers we're the most excited about is that on a Mac, it went from 3.6 seconds to under 1 second. And with these new searching methods, we also have added fuzzy search support, so you don't have to have exact case matching anymore. And then the second area we've been investing in is also in IntelliSense and making IntelliSense faster. So this is when you open up a file, the amount of time it takes from opening the file to have colorization and IntelliSense, like autocomplete and hover and all those features available. And that's 1.5 times faster. And if you're looking at any of these numbers, we really wanted to look at also helping large scale projects. So these are all in the PyTorch repo. So these are pretty large repos. And when you're and so this is specifically for an individual file. But when you hear 1.5 times faster, okay, what does this actually mean? So here I actually have an example. And when we say we're working with we're trying to make this faster, especially for large files where IntelliSense can take a while. This is the amalgamation file in SQLite. Whoops, wait. Okay, sorry. I thought that was the GIF playing. But so this is specifically the amalgamation source file in SQLite, which is 8.8 megabytes. So this used to take much longer, as you're about to see. So on the left is what it used to feel like, and on the right is what it is now. There we go, full colorization. And meanwhile, we're still going on the previous version of the extension. And so it used to take 11 seconds. Now you can get it in 3 seconds for the exact same file on the same machine. And so that's where even this like increment of progress and performance really feels different in terms of IntelliSense. And we really encourage you also to try this out. Let us know how it feels for you and how it feels in your machine. And so, whoops, wait, we actually don't need to watch this again. And so our final area of improvement is something that's actually still in progress, and we have a lot of features that are going to be coming out in the next couple of months around performance, and that's faster startup time. So this is when you're opening a project in C++ in VS Code, and the amount of time it takes to start up. And these are preliminary numbers, which I'm sharing with you. So we still need to do further testing since all of this is currently available in our pre-release insiders. But right now it's looking like it's a 2 to 3 times faster startup time. And so we're going on a Linux machine. This is again in PyTorch. We're going from 68 seconds to 21 seconds to open your file because we're doing more advanced compiler query caching in the background. And so that's where we're really excited to share this in the future. And there's a lot more features coming for performance in terms of like how we're using buffers, compiler querying, how fast IntelliSense is with tag parsing ahead of time. And so there's a lot of work happening in this area. And we're really trying to make a faster and snappier experience for the C++ extension. So that's been a large investment for us in the last year. And hopefully you'll be able to see this we have a number of demos we're going to show you for different features we're building. And hopefully you actually see this difference in the demos we're about to show you. But before we get to that, the next big area we've been investing in is GitHub Copilot. And this is where we actually introduced Copilot last year at our CppCon talk in 2023. And there with Copilot, we showed you, you can like create a workspace from scratch. But there's been a lot of new features built in Copilot in the last year that can generate code, fix errors, explain your code. And now it does this through inline suggestions and through an integrated chat interface. And so it's just so much more integrated into your developer workflow, and it provides smarter suggestions that are more relevant to the work you're doing, and it has more reliable responses and is more integrated. And so before we kind of start showing you all these different features we're building, what we're doing with Copilot, there's a couple of larger concepts to go through that can make you a lot more efficient and productive when using Copilot. And this is where there are 2 different ways to access VS Code. And that's where I was mentioning before, we have chat and inline suggestions. What does that mean? You have the GitHub Copilot chat extension. And so that's like an actual chat interface, similar to what you might be familiar with ChatGPT in the browser. And this is where you can like write commands. You can ask it in natural language what's happening, what code you would like explained, etc. And it can generate dynamic context based on your project. And so that way it can like generate, if you ask it to write a function for you, it can generate the function and insert it for you into your code. Or you can just use code completions, which are inline suggestions. And this is kind of the ghost text you might be familiar with that can generate this code as you are typing and can adjust based on what variables you're typing, what functions you're typing to become more accurate. And this is where the biggest addition for specifically using chat in VS Code has been adding participants. And this is where participants help set context. And the reason we're investing more and more in setting context is because context really creates the best experience you can have in Copilot. The more context Copilot has on what code you're writing, what language you're writing in, what compilers you're using, etc., the more relevant the responses can be for the work that you're doing, and the more efficient you can be as you're coding. And so this is where participants are like an @ symbol with a word following it. So for example, @ workspace includes your project as context for Copilot. and or like add VS Code for settings, or pound file for like a specific file you want to add as context. And Sinem will show you these in a second in our demo. But this is where adding context really makes a better experience. And coming soon here is that we actually will add a pound CPP option where it will provide C++ specific context, so the language standard, the target OS, and also both this pound CPP and the participants will hopefully in the coming months be included through a smart intent detection, so that all of this context can be aggregated and included in any requests you make of Copilot in the future. And then additionally, you have participants, but you also have slash commands. And so the participant kind of sets the context of, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is my project, versus a slash command says, what would you like to do? For example, you want to fix a section of your code, you want to write a test, you wanted to explain your project to you, or you want to explain a section of code to you. And so this is where the participants and the slash commands together build a really good experience that helps Copilot know what your intent is and what you're talking about here. So this was like general advice that you can use for Copilot, but we also have been working on building C++ specific features in Copilot. And the biggest feature we've been working on is having directly referenced C++ header files. And those are now referenced automatically. And what really changed here is that beforehand, when you had a file open, only active files that were open in VS Code in the editor would be used as context to Copilot. And now, whenever you actually add a header to a specific file, that header will automatically be added to the context, even if the header is not open as a file in the editor. And so you can see in this example beforehand, if you reference a header about having different players, but it will just kind of hallucinate and say, hey, maybe you want to write a hello world file, I don't really know what your context is here, versus if you have a header as context, it can say, oh, you have different players, one of them is named Sinem, you probably want to write something around this header since you're referencing it in this file. And so this is where we're just trying to build specific features specifically for C++ developers in Copilot. And so now to actually see a lot of these features live, as well as the other ones we've been working on, the C++ extension and CMake, they will be shown to you by Sinem.
Thank you. All right. Can you see? Okay, cool. All right, so here I have a calculator project open in VS Code on my Mac machine, and I'd like to add some functionality to it and navigate this repo. So I'm not really familiar with it. I've never worked with it before. So this is where Copilot and those participants can actually help me understand dynamically what this project is doing. So if I navigate over to the chat pane, I can ask using the workspace command, what does this project do? And then it will dynamically generate context to send to Copilot in my project to generate a response. So it tells me it's a calculator application that is created using CMake. It includes a GUI built with Qt5 and unit tests written using gtest, and it tells me the key components of this project. So where calculator functionality is stored, the user interface, unit tests, and then the main application. And it also tells me this project is configured with CMake and dependencies are managed using vcpackage. So that is where this project uses vcpackage and CMake to manage its dependencies. So in this case, the unit tests and the user interface. And if your team is struggling with dependency management, I would highly recommend Augustin's talk that was earlier this week on 10 problems that large enterprises face and how to solve them. Lots of useful information here. But this one, vcpackage integrates really easily into my CMake presets, so it's all dynamically generated for me. So this is why this project uses vcpackage. So now that I understand a little bit more about this project, I want to configure and then build it. So in this case, we have the C++ and CMake extensions installed, so we can navigate to the new CMake side panel to learn more about the CMake configurations in this project to configure and then build it. So this view is pretty new this year, so we've been really focusing on providing users with with the best view into their CMake configurations. And so this way I can view and manage my configure presets, or I can fire off a configure, I can manage my build presets and build targets, and then fire off a build, and so on and so forth. Then underneath it, it provides me with a useful view if I want to, for example, view my project not in a folder and file-based structure, but in a CMake targets-based structure. I'm able to see that in the project outline view, and then I can pin any sort of common CMake tasks or commands to the bottom section. And then now by default, we've pulled out more of the common actions that you perform with CMake, such as build, debug, and launch to the status bar, but this is fully configurable using this project status view. So I can pull out any sort of actions from there down to the status bar as well. So this is fully configurable for your CMake project. So actually, if I want to configure that, I can learn a little bit more using Copilot and the VS Code command, or the VS Code participant. So I can ask at VS Code, how do I configure my CMake status bar visibility options? And this way, I don't need to search through the seemingly large settings.json, but it actually can help me understand what settings I need to go to change my CMake status bar visibility. So that way I don't need to, again, especially when you have a bunch of extensions, I can just navigate simply to where it is in the settings editor, and I can toggle the status bar visibility. So there's some defaults here, like icon, which just pulls out everything as an icon, or compact, which pulls out everything in more verbosity, but you can always toggle it using more info to understand like more of the granularities of each specific symbol that you would like. So that's all available to you as a CMake developer. So getting back to what I was trying to do, I want to run a configure and a build. And this is where CMake has new presets as of version 6 to help support you in defining a set of tasks that you want to do, or like CMake preset configurations that you want to perform in a row. And that is called a workflow preset. And so you can create a workflow to, for example, if you perform a particular configure, followed by a particular build, followed by a particular test, you're able to define that as a string of commands for CMake to generate. And that way it's easy to manage across teams and across repos and across OSs. So I'll create a new workflow preset to be a configure followed by a build. So I'll create it from my existing Mac configure preset, and I'll just call it like my Mac workflow. And that will scaffold out everything I need to see in my CMake presets.json. So able to be deeply integrated into the UI. And so now I just want to add a build step to that. So I'll comma, and this is where I can just type in, and it sort of provides me with suggestions on, Copilot provides me with suggestions on what it thinks I'm trying to do. So in this case, it's suggesting that I perform a particular build with my Mac preset and then a test using my x64 debug preset. So this is where it's really an AI pair programmer. So it helps you with saving you those extra keystrokes and some of that mental work, but it's really beneficial to just iterate with it. So I can actually tab through different suggestions, accept the whole thing, or accept it by word. So in this case, I'll just accept the whole thing and then delete the extra tests that I don't want, and then save my changes. Now I can toggle and run my Mac workflow easily from the CMake side panel, and it'll build my project. So it was able to run that configure and build, and I'm seeing that it failed in the build step. So let's take a look at this error. So if I go to the build error, this is where Copilot is also really integrated into the developer workflow. So now when you have any sort of errors, you can actually navigate to quick fix, and you can either fix using Copilot or explain using Copilot. So if you have any sort of complex or unfamiliar errors that you don't think are simple fixes, you can always explain using Copilot, and it will invoke at workspace and /explain to explain more about what's going on here. So it's telling me that the definition doesn't match the declaration, and sort of brings both of them to the forefront to me and provides me with a proposed solution. But in this case, I can also just fix using Copilot, and it'll fix it all in line for me. And so that way I don't need to, if it's a simple fix, I can just have it be fixed with Copilot, and then rerun my workflow and see if my build now passes. So looks like everything completed, and I can move ahead with building out my calculator application. So to do so, I'll open up my calculator.h file and I'll start adding some functions to it. So I would like to add a square root function. And so Copilot's able to pick that up, provide me with suggestions, and Copilot can also help me brainstorm different suggestions based on what it's seeing in the file. So maybe I should add a power function, or maybe I should add a factorial function. So it's able to understand that I'm using a calculator and provide dynamic suggestions for that. Now, let's focus on the square root function for the sake of this demo and implementing it end to end. So I will add my name to the beginning to sort of like make it unique, make it mine, and I will close out of this header file. So if I minimize this a little bit, and I'm in my calculator.cpp file, that pound includes that calculator.h file. So it's automatically included as reference to completions as of the new C++ specific improvements. So it's not actually explicitly open, but I can actually like click, and then it'll provide me with the suggestion to generate a square root function with my error conventions and with the naming and the declaration, the definition that matches the header file. So that all looks great, and these are all C++ specific improvements to completion. So things to look forward to. So another thing to call out is that Copilot is also really deeply integrated into understanding different symbols. So when you're in really large repos and you're not necessarily sure what something does, you can now hover and generate a Copilot summary. So this is actually not yet available to users, but something to look forward to in the coming releases. So it actually provides you with a Copilot generated summary on what it assumes a symbol does. And so when you're navigating repos, you can understand like what a particular symbol does without having to go to the definition, go to the declaration, find all references, and understand what the code really does. So here it tells me quiet name, for example, if I'm unfamiliar or I forget, is a static member function in C++ that represents non-signaling, not a number, which is used to represent undefined values for double types. So able to assist me with all of that stuff. So something to look forward to in the C++ extension in the coming months. So this is just an early preview. So now that I've added this function to my calculator, I want to now update the UI in the calculator to reflect this new operation that's handled. So I can use actually that workspace command to tell me where the operations are handled. So I'll say, where are the operations handled in the calculator UI. And it can also, again, dynamically search my workspace for where I need to go. So it can help me like navigate where I need to make any updates in the UI so I don't have to necessarily like navigate my code. So it tells me that it's in the onCalculateClicked function in the calculator UI.cpp file. So I will go over there and I can just enter at the onCalculateClick function and start typing. And Copilot, again, helps me generate the improvements there. And then I'll just quickly add it as a list of operations up here. So that's all declared. And so everything is added to the UI now. Now, there's a few edits that I now want to make to this function now that I'm looking at it that since I want to leave code better than I found it. And the first is that this X is not very descript and not necessarily, I can't really understand what's going on here. And so this is where I can actually rename the symbol, and Copilot can look at the actual usage of this variable and provide me with more descript naming suggestions for it. So for example, I can name it to be like selected button text instead of X because X isn't very descript. So it really looks at the usage of the variable and understands and proposes suggestions. So I'm able to use that and then save my variable suggestions. Otherwise, I also see that this block of code could be potentially its own member function. And this is where there's updates to the C++ extension that allow you to extract this to a member function in the light bulb. So if I click this, it actually allows me to create an own function. So I'll call this like handle operation. And it scaffolds out the function below, it creates the function call, and then in the UI, it creates the declaration of that function. So it's all very easy to do, so you can easily manage and refactor your code however you would like to. So this was a top ask from our community. So now that I have added functionality to my calculator and added it to the UI, the last step is it's always good to test your code. And so I want to add unit tests for this square root function as well. So what I can do is I can select my new functionality that I added, right click and ask Copilot to generate tests, and it'll invoke /test command to generate some suggestions for me. So I can copy this all. Let's copy here. We'll copy this set over and then the other set. And then the other set, this set, and then that is all copied over. So it followed my existing coding testing framework and generated unit tests for me to add to my existing test calculator.cpp file. So everything looks good. And I'm able to proceed with sort of making sure that everything works in my new calculator. So now that everything looks good, I'm actually noticing that my VS Code's getting a little busy. I have a lot of tabs open, and it's becoming a little bit difficult for me to manage. And so this is where VS Code is really excited to announce that we now have multi-window support. So you can actually pull this out to be its own standalone window now. So really excited to say that now when you have monitors that are, for example, like I'm not presenting at CppCon and I have 3 different monitors, I can have one just be my test code, one just be my calculator code, and maybe one that's just everything in between in the editor. So able to manage that all separately. So now that I've added all this functionality, I'm going to go back and run my workflow and make sure that everything looks good. So I've been doing that a few times now, so I'll pin it as a common command. And I can just invoke that, so it'll run that workflow for me. And everything looks good, and then I'll just launch that using the status bar, and the calculator works. So I can just test it out and see what is the square root of 9. So result is 3, so that works as expected, and let's just double check with my unit test that I generated. So let's move over to the test explorer over here, and let's rerun the test that built and make sure that all my tests pass. So it looks like all my tests pass and everything looks good. So was able to quickly add functionality to my calculator and test to my calculator and navigate the repo using the help of the C++, CMake extensions, and GitHub Copilot. So in summary, we covered a lot of content in this particular demo. So just to get back to a quick recap, there are a lot of new CMake and C++ productivity features available to developers. So the first is extract method, which allows you to extract code using the light bulb and refactor it easily to its own member function. And this was one of our top asks in the C++ repo. So thank you again to our GitHub community and open source community for creating issues, upvoting issues, because it really helps us build tools for the C++ developer. Otherwise, we also added the CMake side panel that is that full view into your CMake configurations, your CMake targets, and allows you to pin any sort of common command. So it's your like one-stop shop for everything CMake, and is fully configurable. So anything you want to see more often in your status bar, you can also pull out there. So that's all new in the CMake extension. And there's also now support for floating editor windows. So you can pull out different files and manage separate windows separately and have it all be like central to your workspace. So that's all really exciting, and really excited to announce to users. And something we didn't get to cover today is that we actually made updates to the CMake quick start command in VS Code. And what that does is it sort of gets you started with CMake. So when you're just getting started, it really sets you up for success, because if you have existing .cpp files, it actually helps you add them as targets to a CMake list.txt. And it also scaffolds out CMake presets based on your compilers, so you're set up for the most amount of success, because we really recommend using CMake presets whenever dealing with CMake, as it's a central configuration, as you saw today, that you're able to toggle and share between different operating systems, so between Mac and Windows and between coworkers. So it's able to be easily to manage from there. Otherwise, there's also been a lot of new GitHub Copilot features. So the first one that's coming soon is Copilot in Quick Info. And what that allows you to do is invoke Copilot on hover. So you can understand what a symbol actually does. So if you're at any point in your repo, you can kind of understand what it does rather than the name of it. So if a symbol is lacking documentation, or it has poor documentation, or you're just in the weeds, you're able to understand what a particular symbol is doing. So that's coming soon in the coming months. So that's something to look forward to. And then another Copilot feature that really looks at what a symbol does is rename suggestions, which is baked into that familiar rename dialog and allows you to, or provides you with more descript rename suggestions of a particular variable. And you can also fix and explain using Copilot. So explain to understand a little bit more about what a particular error code means, and then fix to just fix something inline, and it can provide you with inline suggestions. And then something we didn't get to cover today, but will be featured more in the Visual Studio talk tomorrow, is AI support for commit messages. And this is where if you look out for sparkles and anywhere in your familiar Git workflow, it can actually help you with things like commit messages and pull requests. So you don't have to remember every single thing you do in a particular commit. It actually can sort of like look at your updates and provide you with suggestions so you can avoid those blanketed updated X commit messages. So it can help you with that as well. So we covered a lot of new features that have been added to all of these extensions today. And something that Copilot has also been really focusing on is being able to be extensible to your unique needs. So it has provided a lot of extensibility points, both to VS Code extension authors and to users and organizations that have specific needs. So we're going to sort of dive into the different extensibility points that allow you to tailor Copilot to what you really need. So the first one is, as a VS Code extension author, there are now new APIs available that allow you to build custom Copilot capabilities for your extension. So the first one is the language model API. And what the language model API does is it allows you to build AI-powered features into your own VS Code extension. So if you have something internal, or maybe you have particular users, you can actually build features like you saw today. So actually rename suggestions and commit messages were built using the language model API, and it allows you to specify a language model prompt, how you want to interpret the prompt, and how you want to interface these results to the user. So you're able to build custom Copilot chat features for your developers. Otherwise, you can also extend the chat interface by using the chat extension API, and that allows you to create your own custom participant like you saw today, like at Workspace or at VS Code. You can actually specify like a custom domain expert that has different levels of experience on your code base. And so that way, if you have a particular use case that you're looking to satisfy, you can provide that for your users. So for example, there's a @cat participant that explains pointers in C++ in cat speak. So really acts as its own autonomous chat agent to your users. So something that we wanted to show you today was that we actually built our own chat participant for CppCon to really showcase the power of how participants and domain experts can help enhance results to your users. So we built a custom CppCon participant, and Alex will get into the code and show you how it all works.
Yes, so let's escape this and look at this participant. So this is where, with a participant, you can really tell what the experience is of what we were discussing before, of like adding context really creates a different experience. And so let's take a look at the actual, participant itself. So the participant is actually made so that when you are at CppCon and you want to know more about the schedule, it can help you like figure out what talks are happening, at what time are they happening, who's giving a talk. And so because we pass that context on to Copilot. So if you normally would ask Copilot, okay, tell me 3 talks happening at CppCon 2024 about memory management. Right. Sorry. Okay. So if you would normally ask this question, Copilot says, okay, I can't help you. I don't know what CppCon 2024 is. What talks are happening? Why would I know? So, but if you ask about CppCon in general, like it knows what CppCon is, or it should. And this is where it says, okay, yeah, CppCon is this conference, but CppCon 2024, I don't know. And that's where a participant comes in, and we pass the context of what all the different talks are for this conference to this participant. So now if I type the same command and just say @CppCon, it can actually go through the talks and say, hey, here are 3 talks you'd be interested in. And if you would like to use this participant, we are open sourcing this participant after this talk if you want to make your schedule for tomorrow for specific talks. But this really shows the difference in passing the right context to the requests you're making, because it just provides so many more relevant responses that can actually help you with whatever code you're writing, conferences you're going to, etc. And so when looking at this, building this participant is not as complicated as you might think. And so on a high level, what you just have to do is, if you already have an extension, you add chat participants to your settings, which have an ID, various different commands. And then in your actual TypeScript extension file, you have to add a couple of dependencies and then just connect to create a chat participant, make a request for the user, and then select a chat model. And this is where you can choose from a number of different Copilot models. And for example, the chat you see today in VS Code, the official one, that uses Copilot 4.0, which provides really relevant responses and collects context similarly connects context. But for example, for the inline suggestions you see, which are like the ghost text, that uses Copilot 3.5 Turbo, which is snappier, provides really fast responses, because if you're typing, you don't want responses in a minute. You don't want it to think too long about what you're writing, because you're actively typing code and the suggestions need to be coming quickly. And so that's where you can actually choose your own model that you want to use for your participant, depending on whatever needs the feature or the users have that will be using this participant. And then you pretty much just create a message which you're sending to Copilot, and that includes a prompt. And that's where there is a lot of documentation online by OpenAI on how to craft prompts and what's the best way to craft prompts, with a lot of examples to reference. And so we pretty much just said, hey, you're a scheduler, you need to give a response, there's this conference, this is how it works. And then you add a variable, in this case, CppCon schedule, which contains the context. And this is where you do have to do a little bit of legwork, in the sense that we have all of the different talks available at CppCon, and this context is added to every single request you send. So the request you actually send to Copilot is the user's natural language question, the context that you have added for the specific participant, and then the prompt that you have crafted. And so once that is actually sent to the model, you then wait for a response. And you then parse that response. And this is where, with the example that Sinem showed you, where it's like, oh, it translates it into like cat language. This is the section of the code where you would say, hey, please make this sound like a cat is writing it. And so that's where you can just customize every single part of the experience with Copilot using your own participants. So now going back. Okay. Yes, okay. So now that we've kind of talked about, okay, you're customizing Copilot to whatever needs you have, you're going to a conference, you have your own extension, you can create your own participants. Now, additionally, there is a lot of different features that we've been building in the last year of how a user or an organization can customize Copilot to work for their specific organization, because you're using specific commit messages, you're using specific variable names. And the first way to do that is to have a custom model in Copilot. And so this is where you can receive more personalized and precise coding suggestions by pretty much fine-tuning your own custom model based on your source code. And what happens is you just provide your repository to Copilot, and then there is a version of Copilot trained on that repository, so it knows exactly what's your coding style, what are your preferred libraries, what internal jargon do you use at your companies, how do you name your variables, for example, and it can all customize exactly to your use case, and then you can have a version of Copilot available only to you that is fully aware of how you code and why you code. And one of the teams that actually uses this is the Office team at Microsoft, because they have a completely C++. They have a repo completely written in C++. And so they said code completion has gotten so much better. They can code so much more efficiently, especially when generating functions, with generating specific function names, arguments, and return types. And they're using it to write a bunch of authentication code for Office. And this is currently available for free during beta, but there is a wait list you do need to sign up for. So for any more information, please check out the link we have on the slides to see how you can build your own custom models with Copilot. The next option is content exclusion, and this is specifically if you want Copilot to ignore certain files that you have in your repo and never use these as context. So this is files that will not be used for code completions. These are files that will not be used for context for code completions or inline suggestions, or any of the Copilot chat responses. And this is where if you have specific files that you just never even want to be available in any way, and this is something that's usually managed by an organizational owner, and so you can set this for an entire organization to ignore any files in a specific folder, for example. And this is supported in both Git and non-Git based repos, so if it's with Azure DevOps or hosted locally, etc. And that way you can kind of customize the experience of what files are used. And this is where you can see an example. It says, just ignore any file that's an environment file. And that will not be used for Copilot context for any of the situations we just mentioned. And then finally, we have custom instructions. So custom instructions are more of a workspace level customization to Copilot, where you can specify in plain language in your settings in VS Code and just say, hey, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Copilot, you might want to consider this whenever you are making any suggestions for me. So this is where these are just in plain text, and they will be added to any chat response. This is specifically in chat. We're able to add this specific context to any request you make of what your coding preferences are. If you don't want to go to the point where, you want to train an entire custom model on your on your code repo. And so with that, those are kind of all the different ways you can completely customize the Copilot experience, whether you're an extension author, whether you are working at a large organization, and how you can make the best of it. And if you want to try any of the features that we have discussed today, you can install Copilot yourself. You do need to have an active GitHub Copilot subscription, which is separate from VS Code. And for that, please follow the link we have on the slide that it contains all the information. There's a 30-day free trial for individuals. There's exceptions for students and educators. But that link has all the information on what applies to you. And you just be aware that the GitHub Copilot and the Copilot chat extensions are bundled. So if you install one, it will install the other, so you have the full experience. Yeah. And with that, are there any questions? We have otherwise upcoming talks tomorrow for Visual Studio, which is the talk by Miriam Girmay and Michael Price at 1:30. You can reach out to us via any of the through Twitter, through any of the email we list. And also there is one final raffle happening for anyone who's been keeping up with the raffles. It is happening after this talk at 4:30. And so if you've entered at any point this week, this is the final raffle to win. And that's why the QR code is to enter the raffle one last time right before the talk. And if there are any features that you want to learn more about, we did have a talk here last year where we talked about, for example, the CMake debugger, call hierarchy, et cetera, and a lot of other features we built in the previous year. So that's also a really good reference point. Yeah, and with that was our talk on VS Code. Are there any questions? Otherwise, you're also welcome to come up to us and ask in person after the talk. Yes.
So I'm sorry if I missed this, but if I use ClangD instead of the C++ extension, is there any limitation in the things that you talked about in this presentation?
You can use ClangD with the C++ extension because like IntelliSense is just like the language server. I'm not fully aware of any limitations as far as I know. A lot of the features we're building are specifically for like Go to Symbol and similar. We are building for IntelliSense. So some of the features might not be fully available to you. But for that, I would go check online, and I can follow up with you separately to make sure that, because I don't want to guarantee that everything works with ClangD, but any IntelliSense specific features obviously would not be available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the CMake debugger. That was an amazing feature, like revolutionary. When are we going to have hover value types in that debugger?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are currently in progress of building out our CMake language services even more in VS Code. And so I can't like commit to a particular timeline just because of like, the ongoing work that's going on, but it is top of mind. So I would assume sooner than other, enhancements. It's top of mind for us at CMake. So yeah.
Okay. Seriously amazing to come into work and like all of a sudden like something that was hard is easy.
I appreciate it. All right.
Sounds good.
We'll be available for questions here too and at the booth.
Yes,
So.
if you would like to come by.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.